Hello everybody, welcome to another short report reading. Today, tonight, whatever time it may be, we are looking at Morning Glory, which contains LSA, something I have never personally done before. Quick note before we get into this, this person toward the beginning says that Morning Glory seeds seem to be perfectly safe. That is not necessarily true. They can be sprayed with stuff that can be, well, for one, nauseating. For two, according to the Psychonaut wiki, potentially give you brain damage. So stick around for my commentary where I will go into more detail on that, because you don't want that to happen. So, if you're gonna do this, I don't know, you can do like an extraction of the LSA from the seeds or something like that, which I think is illegal. Eating the raw, like, toxic seeds by themselves is not technically illegal, but, like, taking the substance out of it that you can then use that won't be as harmful for you is illegal. I don't know. I cannot officially condone that you do any illegal activities, but I can officially condone, talking about how fucking stupid that is, so that's all I gotta say on that. On to the actual trip report, though. This one is titled, Adventure of Spectacular Beauty. A Morning Glory trip report uploaded to arrow.org on December 8th, 2025 by Crawdad. For my first psychedelic trip, I ate 7 grams of Morning Glory. I had crushed them into a fine powder. The trip was absolutely perfect. It was probably the most powerful experience in my life. I smoke weed very regularly, and I had taken DXM a few times, though the results of DXM were not great, and I stopped because I was worried about its health effects. But from all my research, Morning Glory seeds seemed to be potent and perfectly safe, and they were available to be bought at a brick-and-mortar store. I'm glad I made this decision. Around 11:30 a.m., I went to a large, remote expanse of woods not far from my house. I'd never seen anyone else here. I found a good spot to establish as my base camp, and it took a few minutes to calm down. It was around 12 p.m. noon when I ate the seeds. I didn't bring my phone, a watch, or any music with me. I wanted no technology interfering between me, the seeds, and nature. The seeds didn't taste bad. At first they had a somewhat pleasant nutty taste, but the more I ate, the more a bitter taste accumulated, and it was still not unbearable. I took some capsules of ginger, and I had no nausea the entire trip. For the first hour, I was disappointed because the seeds had no effect. I thought they were bunk. Into the second hour, I started noticing very subtle color enhancement and some unusual thoughts, though I couldn't tell if I was just imagining this. About an hour and a half or 2 hours in, it was clear that the effects were indeed starting to activate. The colors became very bright yet pale. They had a pastel, sun-faded look, almost like ice cream. Yet they were also more colorful in a way. I saw a lot of purple in places where purple shouldn't be. Nothing super crazy yet. Then the real trip began abruptly with a vivid, if confusing, hallucination. I thought I saw a person walking at the base of the hill I was on, wearing a white shirt and black pants. I freaked out and thought it was a cop. I then noticed a dog and what appeared to be 2 more cops. But the way they looked, considering perspective, made no sense. The white-black blob began to look like a white horse with a black tail, though it looked like a shrouded ghost. It was not really transforming. My interpretation of what it was. I turned away for a split second, looked downhill again, and saw nothing. Figured it was the seeds. The rest of the trip wasn't really like this. Everything took on a trippy, cartoonish appearance. I sat down against a tree and went inward, closing my eyes and imagining all sorts of landscapes, wildlife, and objects. I thought a lot about my life and my family and friends. I was flooded with love and empathy. I cried when I thought I accidentally crushed a bug, and when I saw that the bug was alive and well, I celebrated. I realized that I liked people, that I wanted to meet people and help people. I had the thought of 2 paths, to serve yourself or to serve others. I decided I wanted to take the second. I wanted to go home and hug my parents and my pets, but I could do that when the trip was over. I also realized that I have a lot of personal development I have to do. I've been recovering from a horrific bout of depression, and I realized that depression is a disease I can't control, yet that I have to fight it and be stronger than it. I realized that I am not a kid anymore. I have to be an adult and take responsibility for myself. I decided to get up at this point. It was about 4 p.m. judging by the sunlight levels. I noticed that everything seemed to be pulsing, everything looked really funky. I decided to take a walk elsewhere, to a place where a historical tragedy occurred. In this place, I would reach my peak, and I underwent a scenario I thought of as death and rebirth. Decades ago, the site I went to was the site of a building that burned in a horrific fire which killed dozens of people. The site is overgrown with life again, though it's dry and barren, almost more desert than forest. The ruins of the building still remain. Neighborhood kids always said this place was haunted, and though I'm skeptical of paranormal phenomenon, there is an undeniably spooky, spiritual ambience at this site. At the very least, seeing the carpets and walls of the place forces anyone to think about death and time. In a figurative sense, it truly is haunted. I had a few thoughts of spirits still dwelling in these grounds, and some of these manifested into my perceptions. It was peaceful, though. It was shortly after 6 p.m. and the sun was setting. The trip reached its tempestuous peak right about then. The sunset exploded all the horizon into the colors of a burning rainbow. The darker it got, the stranger and more absurd my thoughts became. I started seeing wide-open hallucinations, mostly of animals I might see. In the trees I saw patterns of deer all around me, in all different sizes. Some I thought were real deer, and only when I got closer could I tell they were illusion. I also saw some specters of coyotes. The deer and coyote imagery had a prehistoric vibe to them. They looked like caveman rock art. Some of the deer I imagined had glowing red eyes. At this point, I started making some tribal drum sounds. When I stopped vocalizing, the drum beat continued to pound on audibly, only with much more convincing realism. It was now a little after 6:30, and the stars came out. They were flanging and pulsating, flashing white and red with a purple glow around them. My thoughts were very muddled now, and my sense of direction was highly distorted, and I walked in circles and struggled to find my way back to where I had eaten the seeds. I became a bit nervous, though I didn't panic. I imagined a tall, cartoonishly red devil pursuing me, and I started to run. I remembered I was not religious, and of course I remembered I had taken the seeds. But the knowledge that I was tripping didn't completely convince me. I would like to emphasize that this anxiety was mild and subdued. I was still in a highly euphoric mood, and in the back of my mind I knew that Satan wasn't really after me. At some point I seemed to separate from my self-grounding. I remembered my identity, my history, and the people I knew, but all that seemed distant and unfamiliar. It seemed like reality was all fake. At various points, it felt like I had traveled through time and was in the remote past. I placed myself in past periods of my own life, the decades before I was born when the fire had happened, and I even felt like I had been an ancient hunter-gatherer or Paleolithic American Indian seeing a vision of this land's future. At some point, I even wondered if the trip had brought me back to the true reality, that my everyday life was actually a hallucination. I even wondered if I was in an afterlife or in some sort of spirit realm. This was a mind-blowing thing to consider, and it was not frightening. It's kind of cool to experience for those several minutes, though I still felt relieved when it wore off. At this point, I was surrounded by visions of deer, and I had no sense of direction. Between 7 and 7:30, I made my way out of the woods and wound up on a golf course, which was safe to use for travel as it was closed for the day. Cars were driving on the hill, and I was worried their headlights would shine on me and the cops would come. This was not the fault of the seeds. I blame the set and setting of being on a private golf course at night for this feeling. I have similar feelings walking on there when not on any psychoactive substances, so I can't blame the seeds. I also felt relieved that I was on solid pavement because I knew the path would lead me back to civilization. I passed through a tunnel that goes under a road, and I felt like I was walking through some sort of metaphysical void. I passed by a highway, seeing cars whir by. The seeds made them blur as though they weren't solid objects. As I returned to the world of man, I began contemplating the ills of modern society. I was disgusted that psychedelics, which had just given me the most captivating and moving experience of my life, an experience that forced me to re-examine my own life priorities, were persecuted by society, and yet the march of greed was celebrated as the pinnacle of progress. I saw how the contemplative experience, the world of wonder and imagination we experienced in childhood, but a world in which I was only just then fully immersed, was suppressed in the name of profit and efficiency, watching the headlights on the highway zoom by forever. I remembered that this highway was the same highway I drive on every day to school, and that I was also guilty of the same rejection of the human spirit. I remembered how I have committed before to do everything I can to preserve and carry on that spirit of joy and wonder, remembering my plan to teach English literature and my active pursuits in playing music and writing poetry. I also remembered the vow I took in the woods earlier that day, the vow that I would do my best to be more outgoing and help other people in some way, whether by volunteering or by giving money to charity. I finally got home. It was 8:30 p.m. I was coming down, though I was far from normal. I had heavy afterglow, and when I closed my eyes, I saw vivid imagery that continued to play on the themes of deer and trees. When I watched TV and got on my computer, the visual distortions seemed to persist on electric screens long after they had faded in my more general vision. This trip was everything I could ask for in a first trip. It was serenely blissful, intensely visual, and it led to a lot of serious thought. It twisted my notions of reality and gave me an adventure without being terrified. It flooded me with empathy, and it shed light on my future. The negative side effects of morning glory seeds were entirely absent, and I fully intend on eating them again in the future many times, and I am open to experimenting with other psychedelics. I plan on growing some morning glory vines, and after I can appreciate their beautiful flowers, I will give these seeds to friends free of charge and ask them to distribute these seeds to others, because I truly believe that their trip is something worth experiencing. Commentary time. Yeah, like I said, be careful when you're just eating these seeds because of the toxic chemicals they might spray on them. Also, another note from the LSA specific article on Psychonaut Wiki. So this is not just for the seeds, but this is like anything that contains LSA. Vasoconstriction. LSA should not be used regularly for long periods of time. When used repeatedly over a short period of time, LSA's vasoconstrictive effects build up while the psychoactive effects get weaker. Common sign of vasoconstriction buildup can be described as a feeling of painful or uncomfortable legs. This happens as a result of an insufficient amount of blood getting to the muscles. The upper leg muscles are the largest, most energy-consuming muscles in the body, and will feel sore if blood flow to them is lowered even slightly. A break has been reported to be helpful. With LSA, it can take up to 3 days of abstinence to get back to vasoconstriction baseline. Okay, so don't do this shit like more than once every 3 days. Really, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing that often in general anyway. But this person seemed to be doing it fairly responsibly, except for the fact that they underestimated the potential toxicity of these seeds, and maybe they just got lucky that it wasn't sprayed with anything. I don't know. Like I said, you can extract it if you want to be a criminal who doesn't want to get nauseous when you consume a psychedelic. Look, I don't know, I'm not like necessarily condoning anything here, especially because I have a friend, and maybe this is just because like they may have eaten the raw seeds and gotten less lucky with what it was sprayed with or something. But they had a Morning Glory, or it might have been Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose trip. They both contain LSA. Similar warnings for both of them. But they ate the seeds, and their trip could be summed up with 3 words. Time-dilated vomiting. So keep that in mind before you decide to do any of this. They said that like if they stood still and did nothing, time would slow down to a halt, practically. And if they moved around, they would get nauseous. And sometimes these, sometimes you get a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B at the same time of that. So, not great from what I heard. But this one seemed to go pretty good. They saw some deer. I've never seen deer on a psychedelic. I want to see some deer on a psychedelic. I really don't know how this substance differs from, like, LSD. I may or may not try it someday. I don't know. If I do, I will probably be careful with it, though. I just saw this warning on Psychonaut Wiki. Not under the, like, big red glowing warning sign, but a little bit further in. Although LSA is illegal in some countries, various seeds which contain it are readily available in many gardening stores. However, the seeds from commercial stores are often coated in some sort of seed treatment or fungicide, which can result in extreme nausea, blah, 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 blah. Or long-term neurological damage and cognitive impairment if ingested. Methods for decleaning or decoding the seeds are available, but are typically ineffective, because the organomercury compounds, the brain-hurty ones, penetrate the entire seed. Therefore, it is important to only purchase untreated seeds from reliable, trusted vendors. Heavy metal testing kits can be purchased online to test seed extracts for mercury content prior to ingestion. Yes, that's pretty important to know. Don't get brain damage, please. So yeah, you can just buy the seeds, but then you might get the bad things in them. You can buy the seeds that are not treated, then you don't get as much bad things in them, but it can still cause nausea. Or you can extract it if you're a criminal. Those seem to be the options. And that's about all I wanted to touch on here. Just give some warnings. Make sure you do your research, stay safe, make good decisions, and don't eat the brain-hurting juice. I will see you all next time.